A 7-2 victory for the Milwaukee Brewers defeats the Pittsburgh Pirates on this Thursday night, right before the holiday. This is another edition of Pirates Postgame here on Pittsburgh Postgame's Pittsburgh Sports Live. I'm your host, as always, Mike Asti, and I am going to be joined by Mike Persak of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. They're in attendance covering the game. And we're going to touch on the Pirates' 7-2 loss here, and maybe what happened at the end of the game with a very, very rare sight to see this year, and we've seen it all, in Rich Rodriguez getting shelled there at the end. Didn't really matter for the game, but still kind of eye-catching. A little pros outing. What's going on with Milwaukee, who right now is pretty good. Right now, 49-33, where the Pirates are now 29-51. The Pirates record makes sense. Many predicted it. I don't know if anyone predicted Milwaukee to be as good as they are leading right now in the division. And maybe also some hot button issues we've been touching on this past week that I will ask Mike to give his thoughts on. So to get things started here, the Brewers win this one now 49-33. So they are at top of the division. So I guess I kind of want to get things started with this question, since, of course, the Pirates lose this one, and it's kind of ho-hum at this point in July, figuring the Pirates season would kind of eventually go this way. And we will get to the Pirates in a moment. But just in general, how good is Milwaukee? Can this be a team that can really go on a deep playoff run based on the other teams that are also in contention this year? And how kind of surprising have they been for you?
Well, so I think that, first of all, I will say a little pat on my own back. I may be wrong, but I think I predicted the Brewers to win the division this year. So
okay, you can pat yourself on the back if you got proof. I'd imagine. I mean, you're the written man. You should be able to prove this at some.
I think so. I might be wrong. I might not have done that, but
okay.
I want to say I did. But no, I mean, they're just pitching. Like, they have incredible starting pitching. Like Woodruff. Right. You can run out a front three of Woodruff, Burns, and Freddie Peralta. Like Peralta, I think people would generally say is probably the third best of that group, but he has a 2.17 ERA right now. So he's a stud. We know what Woodruff does.
Right.
Burns doesn't walk anybody, just strikes everybody out. Like, when you're running those three out, you got a pretty good shot to win at least 3 out of your 5 games from your rotation. And then the offense is picked up too. So they picked up Willy Adames from the Rays. He's been really good for them. Colton Wong has been good, although he left today's game with an injury. Their catcher, Omar Narvaez, has been good. Christian Yelich has actually been a little bit slow, but I guess he's picking things up a little bit. Jackie Bradley has been bad, but I guess he's picking things up a little bit recently. So, it's just like a formula where, like, if you've got that good of starting pitching, you don't need much from the offense. Like, anything they give you is perfectly fine. They're a little bit beat up right now with Lorenzo Cain and Daniel Vogelbach on the IL, and Travis Shaw has been on the IL for a while now, 60-day IL for him. I actually don't know if he's going to – I'm not sure exactly what his deal is or whatever. But either way, the larger point is that, they have enough talent to support the pitching staff, and the pitching staff is going to lead them, I would imagine, to competitiveness at least the rest of the season and into the playoffs if I had to predict it now.
Yeah, a little different, though, for a Brewer team trying to make a run, where you're not seeing this being a Brewer team carried by an MVP, going back to Ryan Braun kind of carrying the load offensively, of course, Prince Fielder there, and then Yelich certainly doing that more recently. But this is a team that has a solid staff that, even with injuries and the offensive players not doing what they're normally supposed to do, they right now are the class of the division. Maybe by default, maybe, with some other teams coming back down to earth and not being what they normally are. I know the Cubs were kind of predicted, but also kind of some thought would falter, which we're now seeing. And then the Cardinals are always that team that, when in doubt, people thought maybe the cockroaches of October would return. But right now, it is certainly Milwaukee. They win this one 7-2. They had an early lead. They kind of kept it handily, but also kerosene thrown on the fire by Rich Rodriguez, who has been that steady force for the Pirates in the back end of the bullpen, and many think he could be that guy that brings value at the trade deadline, if nothing else. Certainly has been a solid closer for Pittsburgh. Just an aberration? Any concerns from this outing? We haven't seen it as much recently, but this is not, I guess, the best of timing if he's going to throw up back-end appearances like this now that we're in July.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't be too concerned. I think it's hard for closers who are I don't know. I was, at least in my mind, I would imagine that it's got to be somewhat tough for closers who are coming in normally tense situations, trying to hold on to a lead to come into a game like this where it's, it's pretty much, it's not out of hand. I mean, it was a 3-run game at that point, but like Pirates offense has been so bad that you don't feel super confident about them coming back from a 3-run.
I'm sure he doesn't. Yes.
Whatever. Even if it's subconsciously, like, but I wouldn't be too concerned. I mean, he's still the same pitcher that he was. You're not going to have a guy throwing like 0.6 ERA all year and being flawless. So like he'll have a couple of these, and I don't think it necessarily hurts his like trade value or anything like that. At least I would be surprised if it did. He's still.
I will say though, a couple of these. I mean, just looking at his line here, and obviously, I'm not saying the guy sucks or he's not going to bring value or he's out of baseball or anything like that. It's just an eye-popping thing for a middle of random summer team out of the race type of game, because you look back, I can't really find another 3 earned run outing for him. We're going back to May. He's had a couple 2. A lot of these goose eggs. It's been goose eggs since June 19th. May 30th, he allowed 2. That's the last time he allowed double-digit runs in an outing. So it's not common for him. It could also, it could be this isn't normally when he would come into games, not the games he normally would deal with. I'm sure there's frustration there. I'm sure there's, what the hell am I doing out here? Like what, I'm sure some of that has to come into play as well, but that you could absolutely say, and I guess you could say it factually based on the numbers, it's his worst outing of the season. 3 earned runs allowed, 4 hits allowed, 1 inning, and ERA still at 2.59, but we're looking at ERAs of below 2 prior to that. So we'll see. I'm sure the value will still be there. Again, the Pirates lose 7-2 on this night here to the rival Milwaukee Brewers. It's Mike Persak from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Of course, I'm Mike Asti, and this is a Pirates edition of Pittsburgh Postgame here on PSL. So what I also want to get to, you mentioned the offense, and that's, I don't want to say has ever been good this year. It really hasn't, up and down. Bryan Hayes has certainly been that guy that has been the player that they're going to build around. Anything for you that you've seen differently recently with him from when he first came back? Because when he first came back from the injuries, he was going crazy. Same old Bryan Hayes, seemed to be the face of the franchise, national attention. That has certainly calmed down. He's had several games in a row in the last week or so without even getting on base. Obviously, he's not the only one struggling, but he's the most important guy. Anything different you've seen, because you watched a lot of these, that's going on with him, since he certainly has been struggling recently, that's also kind of went under the radar? Or is it just a regular slump that's just going to happen for hitters?
I mean, I would lean towards the second part of it. I mean, if we get into, August and he's still struggling, then I think there's a little bit more reason for concern. But, this happens, not only does this just happen for hitters in general, but it also happens for young hitters, right? Like they come up, you see this all the time for top prospects where they come up and they go on a tear, and then people
forget that the games played for him is still not a full season of baseball.
Right. And when like pitchers eventually get the book on you and figure out, a way to get you out, and they start, hammering that, and they figure out where their stuff would play best against you. So like, he's got to adjust to some things for sure. And that's a test, like no doubt. I'm not comparing him to Phillip Evans by any means. However, Phillip Evans, he came over and was on a tear, right? And it's pretty clear now that pitchers have caught up to him and have figured out what they can do to get him out. And he hasn't quite adjusted yet. He's still struggling a little bit. And like I said, I think Bryan Hayes is much more capable of breaking out of that than Phillip Evans is, just from pure talent. And so, I think he'll be all right. Like I said, if it gets another month into the season and we're still talking about Bryan Hayes struggling to drive the ball or whatever. But what I will say is that I was actually pretty encouraged tonight by the hit that he did get.
He did end up with one late, right?
Yeah, driving a double down the right field line, like that's encouraging. Like that's the stuff that when he's going that's what he's doing. He's hitting the ball to all fields. He's driving it hard. He's still doing well in terms of like average exit velocity and stuff like that. Like that hasn't fallen off all that much. So he's still hitting the ball hard. It's just a matter of I guess, figuring out exactly how guys are trying to pitch him, making sure he's getting the ball lifted. He's hitting a lot of ground balls right now, at least sort of anecdotally. That's kind of how I've viewed performances recently. So, there are certainly some things that I'm sure he's working on, but I wouldn't be like too terribly concerned about it.
No, and it's a conversation that's gone under the radar because this team is not a contending team. If you had a player like him and it was a contending team, this probably would be discussed more because he certainly has been struggling and it's been different the last week or so. You also can make the argument with 50 games played exactly headed into the evening. So it's not like there's even a half season of legit baseball in terms of a body of work. So that is very fair to say, but also fair to say that when he returned, maybe he went a little crazy because maybe those pitchers were still trying to catch up to him and they maybe forgot about him for a couple months and they need to learn him again and study the tape again. So he still kind of has that advantage or had that advantage. Maybe that's coming back down to earth. Obviously, the face of the future of the franchise, obviously very, very talented. And obviously, I would imagine there would be a disappointment. I'll see if you agree with this. If he's healthy, disappointment if he's not an all-star next year? Legit all-star?
I don't know.
It's an interesting question. That's going to be a debate, I would imagine, in random Pirate conversation off season, whenever that would occur. Because I'm talking about a full season, which we haven't seen yet. If he's healthy, we're figuring better with COVID, and he plays a reasonable amount of games headed into the all-star break. Would you not assume all-star situation, whether they get it or not, because the Pirates are probably still not going to be winning, but by his number, should he have an all-star caliber year? Based on the hype nationally, I feel like they're going to start saying it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I don't know. I guess it's how you sort of like what you consider a disappointment, right? Like if he didn't make it, I think it would be pretty shameful if Pirates fans were like, this guy's a bust. Like,
Oh, sure. I don't mean quit on him. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I think that it's certainly possible, like with his skill set, if he can figure it out. And if basically he can do something to get pitchers to pitch him more in sweet spot, you know what I'm saying? Like, because that is part of the thing too with it, right?
It's a mental chess game, yeah.
And I was going to bring this up too. Like he's walking a lot more. It just appears like pitchers are being a little bit more fine with him and maybe figuring out where his hot zones are and just staying away from that because they know that he's one of the guys with power in the lineup, one of the only really two guys in the lineup.
Right. Hey, if he's walking more, though, that might make that's okay. That'll at least get him on base, and it might make pitchers change their game plan because they don't want to just walk him on all the time.
Right. So, but to answer your original question, I don't know. Disappointment maybe putting it a little bit. I mean, it's hard to be an all-star, right? But he certainly has the tools to do it. And I understand why people would be hyped up about it. And I don't know if expecting it's the right word. I will say that I think he has a better shot if Adam Frazier does get traded. Then you're running out of guys who you have to have an all-star. You're running out of guys who are qualified to make it there. It'd be like him and Bryan Reynolds, and then I don't know who else. So maybe in that sense it would be a disappointment if he wasn't the guy. But it's really just a matter of him figuring it out for himself because it's pretty clear he has the talent to do so.
Yeah, and there's a segue because I actually was gonna lead into this. I figured why not go into this after we're talking about a hypothetical Ke'Bryan Hayes All-Star appearance next year. That's not going to be the case this year. So let's go there with who actually is a candidate this year. The Pirates clearly. I swear to God, I was confused one day. I'm looking through Twitter. I see Adam Frazier's face, and I see this is an Adam Frazier Stan account, and I'm thinking, I didn't think I was following some Adam Frazier blog or something, and then I see the follow number, and I'm like, man, what kind of Adam Frazier blog is looking at those follower numbers? And it's nope, the Pirates just threw Adam Frazier's face over there, and now the Pirates apparently at Pirates is an Adam Frazier fan account because apparently they know the situation. So the Pirates trying to get Adam, whether he's going to be here or not, they want to squeeze it out and help him out and help them out and get that All-Star appearance and try to get him the votes to get into the All-Star game. Bryan Reynolds having certainly an All-Star caliber season, much more of 2 years ago than last year, proving himself that maybe he could be part of the future of this franchise, along with Ke'Bryan Hayes. And of course, JT Brewbacker's flirted with it. Tyler Anderson's flirted with it. Rich Rodriguez maybe has flirted with it. Again, outings like this aren't going to help the cause. There's a whole conversation out there that despite, and it's very, very weird. I think maybe you would agree that for a 29-51 team as we're speaking, and knowing how bad they were going to be coming into the year, you knew there were some good players there. But to even have conversation on how many All-Stars they should have or maybe will have is kind of wild. I mean, I think nationally people probably don't recall or aren't aware there are some players on this team this year, despite them being so bad as a team, that are having solid years. So for you, who's the All-Star? How many All-Stars should and will they have? Because I don't think they're going to get multiple, but it's a weird conversation with the quality years that some of these individuals are actually having.
Yeah, to me, I think there are two. So obviously Frazier made it tonight, but Bryan Reynolds should be an All-Star. Like you could argue, right. I could argue pretty strongly that Bryan Reynolds is having a better offensive season than Adam Frazier. Like there are multiple stats that would tell you that. And granted, you can point at other ones and say Adam Frazier is having ones, but that's not really the point. It's just that if Adam Frazier is going to be so strongly, like if he's going to be first place vote getter, and I get that it's a weaker field at second base than what Bryan Reynolds.
That's the thing. Yeah.
But Bryan Reynolds should be an All-Star. Like his stats back it up. Even if it's as a reserve, I think that he should get some recognition. He certainly should have been a guy who was at least eligible to be voted in after the first phase. So I don't know if it were my, if I were the guy picking the All-Star teams, I think I'd take two of them. I understand what you're saying with Rich Rodriguez and JT Brubaker and all that, but I don't think they're quite All-Star level. Right. But I think your point is true though. Still, that like it is pretty funny that a team that's been so bad has had some pretty solid individual performances at least.
Yeah.
You could point to like 3, 4, 5 guys.
That's
6.
Wild. I mean, you could argue for 5 people. They're obviously not all going to make it, but to be able to argue for 5 people on a team that's already lost 50 games in this season and is looking at the basement, I cannot recall a team being this bad that had so many legit all-star candidates, I guess is the word.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I think we may be stretching it a little bit to say that like Tyler Anderson would be like an
okay, that's fair.
Or JT Brubaker, he's had a really good year, but even still, like
he's come back down to earth. Yeah,
and the competition for starting pitcher in an All-Star game, like it's so strong. Like those guys are so good. And it would be, he would have a shout at it if it were like Adam Frazier were hitting like 270 and Bryan Reynolds were having a good year. Sure. Like he could be like the automatic guy for sure. But I think it'd be pretty. I don't think he stacks up super well against like some of the other elite starting pitching. Sure. But that's no knock against him. I think the larger point is just that like the individual seasons are still solid for a team that's been so bad. I think
right.
I think it really just underscores the fact that the guys who aren't having solid seasons are just struggling so much. Like their offense, I was looking at it tonight, and I guess heading into the game, the stats were actually fixed for the better for the Pirates during the game. But heading into the game, they had 3 guys in their entire healthy roster, because Colin Moran is hurt, who were hitting above 230, which is crazy. Jacob Stallings had 2 hits tonight, which bumped him to 231. And Eric Gonzalez went 1 for 3, which bumped him above 230. But then he got hurt, and he might be going to the injured list too. So, like, the gulf in the lineup between, like, the good and bad players is just so large. Even in the starting pitching, like, I don't dislike Will Crow or Chase DeYoung necessarily, but like those guys aren't major league starting pitchers for
they're not going deep in games.
It's just like I said, the gap between the good players and the bad players is just so staggering, and it's hard to win a lot of games like that, which is kind of
and it could be. And obviously at the beginning of the year, JT Brubaker was having a legit all-star season. For a while he was really out of his mind, but you do look at starts from him, Tyler Anderson, of course, Max Kranick a week ago, but then you mix in Will Crow and what was even going on with Chad Coolway at the beginning of the year, where they're not getting out of the 4th inning. So, I think your point is that you have some that are having above average seasons for a really, really bad team, or their expectations for themselves, at least quality years. But then the next night is just a catastrophe. So it ends up leading to the record they currently have in the 7-2 loss to the Brewers. Will Crow did allow 2 earned runs, 4 hits, 4 1/4, 6 Ks, 3 walks, near a now of 6.26. He actually didn't allow the most runs on the night. Of course, Holmes and Rodriguez were stacking some. But, yeah, not the greatest outing for him. We do actually have some chatters here who are bringing up, and this is all defense of Bryan Reynolds. Bryan Reynolds should at least be a reserve, even if he's not a top 3 NL outfielder. He's having an all-star year. Yeah, I get you. There are actually many that believe, if you look at the numbers, that he is having a top 3 NL outfielder year. That's absolutely a legit argument, whether you're going to get votes or not. You look at the numbers, absolutely there. And that's a deep position. And, of course, you look at what's going on even in the American League, where Mike Trout's stacking votes, even with him not having played for months. It's a popularity contest. I mean, that's just how it's always been.
Yeah.
Ken Griffey Jr. was stacking all-star starts when he wasn't playing half the year. People know a name, they're going to vote. But there's still room to give respect to guys that are having individual seasons. So you actually can make the argument without having to stretch anything. For a team as bad as the Pirates have been this year, to have 2 guys that have a legit all-star season and 2 guys that really should be there, because you look at injuries, I almost feel like gut feeling Bryan Reynolds is going to squeeze in there somehow. That's amazing. That's amazing to have 2 dudes to squeeze in there. And big market bias is brought up here in the chat. I don't even know really if that comes into play in this, because, big market bias could come in, but there are people actually with the Mike Trout thing that believe he's not marketable enough, and people didn't know how great he was his first few years, and there was a whole debate when his career started that Bryce Harper was better than him, as asinine as that sounds now with their careers. So it's kind of weird, actually, honestly, as much as Mike Trout, of course, does not deserve to start this All-Star game, there's a part of me that kind of loves it, because he got disrespected for so many years, and he could have won the MVP every year. The go ahead, that's fine.
I'm curious how big market bias has played in this year, because even the guys who are starting in the outfield. I guess I didn't see the official announcement, but Winker and Castellanos. I mean, Cincinnati. It's not like that's a big market.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think it's as much this year.
I wonder. I saw a theory that Adam Frazier got in because he's being rumored to be traded to the White Sox and Yankees. So like Chicago and New York markets got in voting for Adam Frazier too. Possible. I won't throw it out.
It could be possible, but hey, the Pirates aren't mad about it no matter what ends up happening. And of course, that's only going to potentially help the value in the negotiations, because you have Ben Cherington on the phone. So I'm sure he's going to say, what do you want to offer me for my all-star rather than just Adam Frazier? He's going to throw that word in there, whether it's a conspiracy or not. Mike Persak from the PG joining me here. Of course, Pirates post-game here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Hit that subscribe button if you're in the chat, or if you're not, just watching along, and help us get all of our content to you. Thanks to our sponsors. It is free to hit that subscribe button. So I do want to also ask you, and it's been the talk of the last week, we've talked about it ad nauseum on any show I've been on or I'm hosting, but I haven't asked you. And this would be the weekend we would see him again, and this is kind of where the conversation potentially could rev up the engines again, depending on what happens on July 4th. What occurred with Max Kranick last week and the 5 perfect innings? We see the rain delay. He doesn't go more, right call there with the hour delay. But ridiculous. 5 perfect innings to start a debut. It would have been cool, I don't think anyone can deny, to see a holiday weekend where somebody goes for the second Major League Baseball start with that hype, with his prior start, looking to build on it, especially because he didn't get to go as far as maybe his talent could have saw him go with the weather coming into play. Granted, I think it's supposed to rain this weekend anyway. And then get sent down 24 hours later, kind of popping the balloon. What's your opinion on that matter? Because there are some that have the opinion that the season is a moot point anyway, so who cares about the bullpen arm? Why don't we get some excitement for July, especially July 4th weekend? Because right now, and I cover the Steelers, I'll tell you, this is dog days for covering the Steelers right now. I'm waiting for Juju or Claypool to make some noise, and I enjoy Devin Bush kind of tweeting today and kind of sticking his foot in his mouth, because that's the coverage right now. We're in that 2-3 week period before training camp revs up and after OTAs, where unless there's drama, this is kind of calm. I could argue, and this has not been the case all year for a while at least, since Hayes' return probably, that if you had him out there, if you had Kranick out there after his first start, holiday weekend, that would have let off pretty much every outlet, I would imagine, that covers everything, depending on how he would do, certainly a preview. So we don't get it, but was that the right call to not get it, understanding the situation and understanding his youth? Or would you like to let it linger and let us get a holiday weekend with that second start after a perfect game just because the timing was so weird, even though it was unexpected and how well he pitched.
Yeah, I think that last part is kind of what makes it so odd, right? Because he is young and he is inexperienced even in the minor leagues. He was called up from AA to AAA earlier this year. He's had like 5 starts at AAA or something like that. Like, that's not normally a guy that you'd expect to be called up to the majors. He gets the call up, and then he throws 5 perfect innings. Now it's like, well, okay. Like, Ben Cherington said as much today, I think, that the plan was always to have Kranick throw one time and then go back down. So if that's true, then like, I guess you can't fault them for like following through on their plan. Like, that was always their plan. You want to give them up, give them a taste, go back down and work on some things or whatever. It's just a really tough look when the guy dominates like he dominated.
That's what I'm saying. The optics are bad, and the Pirates' optics are almost rarely good. So.
Right, but you think about it, like, it was the same conversation we had with Yahure earlier this year too. I know that he's hurt now, but he came up and pitched really well, especially that second time. I know he pitched twice. The first time was a little bit more rocky. The second time was more smooth, and he looked fine in the first one too. But the larger point is that, like, it's tough. I get it, because guys, I mean, fans are looking for anything. Like, just give us something, give us young guys, whatever. And I understand that. Like, I kind of agree with that. But if this is the plan and this is, what the Pirates are doing, then like, you can't really knock them for following through with it, even if it is just frustrating. But like, I do sympathize with people, because like, you're watching this team and you watch, I mentioned him earlier, you watch Will Crowe and Chase DeYoung go through, once every 5th day. Like, it's frustrating watching guys that are like fine, but they're really not a piece of the future. Like,
I think honestly,
top 30 prospects come up pitch. So I totally sympathize with that. I just think that, like, if this was the Pirates' plan, you kind of have to stick with it. If this is part of your development plan, you got to stick with it and ride it out for everybody,
Yeah, and of course, when you're Ben Cherington, when you're the Pirates, you're a pro team, you're rebuilding, and he's certainly had success before. You can't deviate from a plan because of fan peer pressure. So I'm not going to advocate for that, of course. However, if you ever were going to, this would have been the time, just because I'll even put this out there. I would rather see Max Kranick go back out there with the risk, because of his lack of experience, as you mentioned, and flat out get shelled and suck and allowed 6 earned runs, which I don't think anyone would have been shell-shocked if occurred, because the 5 perfect innings were so surprising, than to see Will Crowe go back out there, because Will Crowe, what's going to go down. 4 1/4, 2 or 3 earned, a couple strikeouts, a couple walks. He's gone. Bullpen comes in. There it is. I mean, I wrote your story. I wouldn't have to wait for it. So at least there would be some intrigue before the game at minimum. And I do think, based on what I saw just on my eyes, 5 perfect innings, of course, that's phenomenal. But the way he was going about the innings, the fact that he was quick work and that he was really hitting the spots, again, inexperience, it doesn't scream to me that if he would have went out there and got shelled, that it would have ruined him. I mean, there's maturity there. He knows that's going to happen. I'm sure they would have told him it's no big deal. The 5 perfect innings were well above what anyone thought was going to occur. And then you could send him down and he could just dominate and build his confidence back up. So I don't think there was a risk of just ruining him as a person off of one bad start, and it would have created some intrigue going into it. You actually do, again, and we're after midnight here, so we're into the next day, but apparently when you talk about this subject, it actually revs up the engine of the chat here. Honestly, rather see Kranick. You might as well. They're not contending. We've seen enough of everybody else that we've already been mentioning. So, yeah, I get it. That's pretty much the overlying opinion. And I also think that maybe this has been the Pirates' problems over the years in terms of optics. And, of course, this is a different regime, so it's different. But you mentioned the real reason, which is the plan. And they're sticking to the plan, which they did say. But there's also the conversation, and the other side of the debate has been brought up a lot of, well, they needed another bullpen arm.
Yeah.
I don't think that can be the argument, because this team, you're not getting a bullpen arm to go ahead and go for a pennant race here.
Right.
What are you doing?
I was going to bring that up. I'm glad you did, because I mentioned this I think it was on our podcast the other night, the North Shore Drive, little plug, shameless plug.
Sure, yeah. Go ahead. What is it again? You want to get it?
Yeah, but I brought this up because the original explanation from Derek Shelton was that, hey, we need another bullpen arm.
Right.
We know we're going to Colorado. However, the bullpen wasn't taxed because when Kranick left, Dwayne Underwood Jr. came in and threw 3 innings. So he ate up those innings. It's not like you're using a bunch of arms. Right. God, that's supposed to be the fix for that, So I agreed yesterday when we recorded that of that can't be the reason that because you
right,
you might as well just move someone else out to the bullpen or let Chad Cool or not Chad Cool, Cody Ponce. I'm blanking. Sorry, Chase Young.
Well, you know what screws the bullpen? When Will Crow goes 4 innings.
Right. Yeah, and so I get it from the two perspectives I get it from are if this is the plan all along, then fine. And the second one is listen, the other option is to send someone else down or DFA someone and then we may lose a guy unnecessarily. And if that's the other consideration, I do understand that because 5 perfect innings from a guy you didn't expect him from may not be worth losing a guy completely who you haven't given up on. I get it. I still side on the idea with all the fans of I'd rather see Kranick than some of the guys where it feels like you're bashing your head into the wall.
Especially holiday weekend and the Steelers aren't being talked about. This is it.
I get it. I'm with you. I understand the frustration. Rebuilds are hard, man. They take a long time, especially in baseball where it's 162 games and it feels sometimes it's even when a team is good, the season sometimes feels like it's just crawling by. It's tough, man. It's you have to be patient and it's not for the faint of heart. I think that's really the lesson you can take away here.
That is the lesson. I'm sure Pirate fans are rolling their eyes while hearing it because anyone who's been a fan more than this year, I'm sure, has dealt with it time and time again. But again, it's a different regime, so it's a different rebuild. You look at some trades and moves in the offseason. You hope they're doing it better than the past, but you never know. The result may end up being the same. We'll see. As we get towards the deadline, though, we talked about some players that are viable all-star candidates and a lot of individuals having quality years. There's also been a conversation of Bryan Reynolds is the face of the future, or Bryan Hayes is the face of the future. They're kind of a combo.
Right. I like that combination. It's easy. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Bryan Hayes is the face of the future. Bryan Reynolds also to be there, kind of the Robin to his Batman, it appears. So I guess I'll ask you, is Bryan Reynolds also with Bryan Hayes that guy for the future? Is that solidified now? Because that was a question before the season. And then, has there been anybody else on this team at all that jumps out at you, because several have been discussed at different points, that could join them in being a player that you do not believe Ben Cherington would move unless he is well? Adam Frazier has been discussed. Is there anyone else? Bryan Hayes, does Bryan Reynolds join him? And then is there anyone else that is an untouchable player that they want to try to rebuild around and want to be on the winning team whenever the hell it would actually end up occurring?
Okay, so I'm going to approach this from guys that they would like to keep around because I will say that the Bryan Reynolds situation, I think that they should try to extend him. They should try. Okay. However, if he's not down, if he doesn't want to extend, then you start to be well, we'll trade you because he has a ton of value. He's a young guy, whatever. I don't think that that's crazy out of the question because if he's not willing to extend, then maybe it's not worth trying to keep him around to last 2 years into your championship window before he's a free agent anyways, Right. However, that's sort of beside the point. I think that from their perspective, they'd like to keep Bryan Reynolds. They'd like to keep Bryan Hayes. JT Brubaker would be another one who's young enough and been good enough where you might as well keep him around until, if the wheels fall off eventually, then fine. He was kind of unexpected anyways. The other guy that I think they're going to keep around at least for the next couple of years, I would be surprised if Colin Moran wasn't around. He's obviously struggled with injuries this year to the point where maybe his trade value, if they were considering it, is not where it would have been.
That might be why. Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, there's not really a first baseman ready to take control. Sure. He has been good when he's been healthy. So maybe it's the kind of thing where you have more value. you see more value in him than other teams do. So you kind of keep him around until something changes there. Jacob Stallings, probably he's struggled a little bit recently. But I think, again, like if there's no catcher ready to usurp him in the near future and you're not willing to spend for one on the free agent market, then you might as well keep him around. He's been perfectly fine. And then you just kind of hope for Mitch Keller, and the rest, maybe nothing. It's kind of a weird group of you could make a case for a bunch of guys, I'm sure, that have been like serviceable. Like, if Eric Gonzalez were a reserve utility man on this team in 2 years, I don't think anybody would be, upset about it. Like, he's fine. Like, on a good team, he'd be fine. Like, he does everything kind of well. So, like, whatever. Right. But there's no one else that I think is like a face of the future other than Bryan Reynolds, Bryan Hayes,
Yeah, or Key Bryan Reynolds, as I now dub them. Key Bryan Reynolds. But yes, Key Bryan Hayes, of course. I think Bryan Reynolds has joined him unless they can be wild by value. But if you're telling me, and maybe that is an opinion that I've heard, if he's not down to be there for the long haul, then of course you get mature and try to increase the value and make it to be as much as you can, because of course his value is high as it really possibly could. And there is a risk that it only could go down from here. Especially if he squeezes in an all-star appearance again. That is, you're going to probably figure you can't bank on, if this team's going to be bad again next year, you can't bank on 2 all-stars again next year. Adam Frazier not likely to be there. He won't have that season. But you get what I'm saying. His value could be the highest if he's not down. That certainly could be another guy that you then would be forced to move. Key Bryan Hayes would be that guy that I think we can all guarantee won't be moved no matter what occurs.
Right.
And then nobody else. Adam Frazier's age doesn't dictate it. His value is just crazy. You got to do it. Rich Rodriguez is a closer. What value do they have on a team this bad? And it'll be more value elsewhere. That just watch, rinse, and repeat for Pirate closers over the years. We've seen that story before. One guy I want to bring up before we close up shop here, because he actually was a question that somebody brought up in the chat as you were talking. And this is a player that's been unsung, who has been really good, actually was good last year, has been a part of the offense and the defense, certainly commanded the pitching staff this year. I think you got to give him a lot of credit for how well a lot of these pitchers have pitched, which is why this team hasn't already lost 70 games and why some of these pitchers have actually had solid years. Again, JT Brubaker, Tyler Anderson, you could certainly bring up. Maybe even when you see a rookie go out and throw 5 perfect innings, you can certainly give him a nod and just in terms of mentorship with Jacob Stallings, who has higher value than you ever could figure before, actually play better than some would have thought even a year ago. There's a question here. Is he a guy that actually could stay if you're not thinking you're going to get enough value for him, just because he's solidified a position and seemingly likes being around and certainly has a connection with his family to the area before, but it appears that I'm sure that won't be happening, I'd imagine. What are your thoughts on Jacob Stallings in terms of value or keeping him?
I think I mentioned him. I think he's a guy that you keep. There's nobody, because if he goes, I mean, what's next? You got to go sign a guy.
He's just not the youngest guy in the world, and I guess his value.
Oh no, for sure. 100%. I understand like why people would say that, but even if he stays around, like I think he matures into like a fine backup catcher that's like maybe a little older too. Like I don't like. I think the worst case scenario with Jacob Stallings is just Michael Perez. Like it's just a guy who's like he's obviously older than Michael Perez, but it's just a guy who's like maybe not going to give you a ton on offense, but man, he can come in and control your pitchers and be perfectly fine as a backup. And maybe you go find a guy who's a better offensive catcher and you figure it out after that. But like, he has a ton of value for you, especially if you have a bunch of young pitchers coming up. You mentioned Kranick. Like to me, I think he's a guy that you'd like to keep around as long as he's still producing at a reasonable level. If someone is going to come in and shock you with a trade offer, then like, fine. Like, I'm not saying you have to be married to the guy, but I think he has a ton of value to the Pirates. I don't think he's done it. Even if he's struggling a little bit hitting, like catching isn't a position where you expect guys to be hitting 270, year in, year out. Like there's more value on the other side of the ball. So, and he does that really well. So I really don't think that, it would be a surprise to me if he were still here in 2 or 3 years, even if he is a little bit older.
Well, even mentioning your North Shore podcast there at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, I had Nemias Wilburn, a colleague of yours, on a show earlier in the season, and we played a little fun game of trying to name 5 other catchers that are really better than him across Major League Baseball, because it's just not a flat out deep position. So if you have one and you don't have much talent in the minor league system in terms of the position, at least not in terms of depth, then yeah, maybe his value is better than it ever will be, because as you mentioned, he could falter any minute and all of a sudden be a backup. And if that occurs, then obviously his value goes from potential starter on middle of the road team, or even a guy you could bring in there and be okay on a pennant winning team, a guy that can actually be a good player that could start for you in a playoff game and you're not going to be upset about it. He can go 1 for 4 and be great for the pitching staff in a big game. That would be fine. And that might change next year. That value might not be there. So you can get something for that man, but also again, it is not a deep position in Major League Baseball, let alone the Pirates system. So for him to be there doing it for you, maybe you are best served, because you also got to think of it this way. If you're willing to give him credit for the pitching success this year, if he is not there next year, even though you're not banking on it being a winning season, it potentially will make it tougher on all those pitchers who could regress or not progress to what you want. And of course, during a rebuild, maybe if nothing else, you want to keep him around for 1 or 2 more years just to help the pitching staff make him okay as what he is now, and let him be the bridge to whoever else ends up being the catcher on the team whenever they actually win, since his age probably wouldn't get him there. But yeah, I don't think it'd be the end of the world if he stays. I see his value probably bringing something, obviously, if they would move him. But he's a guy that it's hard for me not to root for, honestly. I like seeing him get a hit every game. I mean, he's just such a nice dude. He's making the last name get a little better feel in the city of Pittsburgh from what it was before. And it's just not a deep position. This is not the 90s with Pudge Rodriguez and Mike Piazza and everyone else. This is not Molina's there still, but this is not a position that is riddled with depth across the league. So you have one that's okay and serviceable. Yeah, it might be okay.
So you brought up the 5 better catchers, and I was looking at the stats, and this is just completely random.
Okay, go ahead.
You realize that Buster Posey has like a 1,000 OPS this year? Where did that come from? How old is he? I feel like he'd had a few down years, and now he's 34 and has an almost 1,000 OPS. Like, where did that come from?
I feel like his down years also where he was injured for a while mixed in there, but it was Buster Posey. Buster Posey was that weird player that there was a while he had a Derek Jeter type of early career where he was just winning World Series after World Series and being that kind of face of the franchise, but then the injuries derailed things. But that's interesting.
Yeah. Anyways, shout out Buster Posey. I think he's an all-star this year too. So, and well deserved.
And I didn't mention him, so of course Buster Posey is involved. Buster Posey is certainly a veteran. I mean, really, at one point was building a Hall of Fame career, so we'll see. But he's not getting as much publicity, I guess, as in the past. But yeah, I mean, great resurgence for him. Had some down years with injuries, but still a great player and was a spark plug and was a leader on championship teams. So he got lucky with those early career rings, like Jeter did. Those were great teams, but he certainly was a big part of it. Yeah. And he was an MVP player early in his career, for crying out loud. So so he is one of them. But that's basically, I think, the point that we were making on that show is you're looking at Hall of Famer, MVP borderline Hall of Fame. Okay, Jacob Stallings.
Yeah.
I think that's like the top 5. It's not a deep position. So it could the Pirates could certainly be worse with the situation at the backstop than many other teams. And if you move them, somebody else is going to go from really bad to being okay. And then I don't know how they're going to replace it. They're going to end up with that being an incredibly weak position, probably.
Because and people bring up catcher depth in the organization or whatever all the time.
And that was brought up in the chat. Minor league depth.
Yeah. And what I will say is I don't think it's that big of a deal, like to not have depth at a position in the minor leagues. Like obviously you'd like to have a guy at AAA who's just raking as a catcher. Like, of course that'd be great. But you can go get a guy. Like if Jacob Stallings ages out and he isn't there anymore, like and that's your last position of need or whatever, like you go find a catcher. It's not that big of a deal. And, they have Endy Rodriguez down in low A. Like, maybe he pans out. Maybe he doesn't. But if it's 1 or 2 positions that you just need, like, you can go get them. Like, it's not like it has to be a problem.
Sure. Yeah. And it's not a position that has a long shelf life, though.
Right.
So it is a position that you figure you're probably turning over unless you get a Buster Posey type of player for the next decade. You probably are turning it over every 3 years, if you're lucky.
Right, so, for sure.
Yeah, so that's certainly the situation, Mike. I definitely appreciate the time for sure. It was a great program yet again. Happy to have you back. It's been a while since you were on one of these, so I'm glad to have you back. Enjoy your holiday weekend. It's a lot more Pirates Brewers coming up. It's a lot more of the same here. And then, of course, you get Pirates Braves, I believe, Monday, which might be a day some people are still off. So maybe we'll trickle it into calling it the holiday weekend plus. Just before we close it up, any thoughts on this weekend? Anything you're expecting to see the rest of this series? Anything that's not just ho-hum, 4 innings and move on? We don't get Max Kranick, so is there any other reason to watch Pirates baseball outside of it's just something to do? Because the attendance down there, I saw the comparisons. I saw your tweet. I mean, they're matching minor league teams. It's not phenomenal. If they're allowing COVID people and vaccines and numbers are higher and people are supposed to be able to get down to the ballpark, then it should be higher than what they're throwing up there number-wise. Will it be higher in a holiday weekend if people are, say, even off Monday? Who knows for around Major League Baseball. But the Pirates attendance just, it hasn't been good. You're not predicting it. Give us a reason to go down to the ballpark, Mike.
I still don't know who's starting Saturday. Maybe it'll be something fun. Look forward to that. Listen, man. Hey, here's my pitch. At some point, the offense has been so bad. At some point, they're going to have a big game. You don't want to miss it when it happens.
At some point, Bryan Reynolds will hit one.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want it to be the game that you didn't go, so you might as well go. I don't know. There'll be fireworks. I'm sure there's stuff that It's a day at the ballpark. It's supposed to be decent weather. I think the rain's supposed to hold off. It's supposed to rain earlier tomorrow and then clear up afterwards. Like, I don't know, go to a ball game. Like that's really my only pitch. Like the product is pretty tough right now. I don't think it'll be this bad all season, but it's tough right now. So you might as well, I don't know, watch. I don't know.
Yeah. And then you got the random reopening. You got Big and Rich.
So we sat. I'll finish with this. We sat and we're like writing as Big and Rich is going on. Man, was it odd. I mean, because not everybody that was there stayed. Like there were like 4,000 people there by the time Big and Rich came on, and Buddy was in a strange atmosphere. Like it was so strange.
Is it your first concert experience since COVID? Was that it officially?
Yes, it must be. I guess it must
be. Oh my God, you're gonna remember that forever then.
It was very odd. Just a strange experience. I will never forget that. I can guarantee you.
Yeah, it just had to be a weird vibe being there because I mean I don't even know. It had to be weird for Big and Rich. In all honesty, I mean, let's get that perspective out there that hasn't been touched on. Had to be weird for them. I mean, the situation and nobody really being there, and then even calling it a reopening. And I kind of get the thinking, but that's not something that I feel like was picked up on across Major League Baseball or nationally that the Pirates are doing this random reopening and you're having a concert and Big and Rich there. And
no, and it's also like it's a Thursday.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, this is still Thursday. Yes.
Yeah. And reopening weekend, or reopening day or whatever, you have 11,000 people. Like that's a tough look, man. And it's a direct reflection of like, I know there are also, there's also some outrage about Big and Rich being there anyways. They have a checkered past, but I won't get it too deep into that. But, but it is a direct reflection of just like apathy for the team right now. People are more excited for the MLB draft and the trade deadline than they are for the actual games. And like, that's the nature of things. Obviously, they want to get that turned around. They're not content with that, I don't think. But it's just how things are right now, and it's pretty brutal game in, game out.
Yeah. And next time we have you on, or whoever, maybe we'll talk about some draft and your opinions there later, who the Pirates should be taking. We obviously saw him recently, pitched well, but Vanderbilt did not win the national championship. And a Pirate connection there with David Benar's thoughts and having his brother end up with that ring. So that's a cool thing that did happen around the Pirates. But I think the Pirates, the overlying theme of this show, they just never fall into proper optics. And when you're dealing with this season, you bring in Big and Rich, the team's not winning. It almost is like they would have been better off playing baseball on Thursday. Just let it be baseball on Thursday. You don't even have to announce this as a reopening. If you have 11,000 people there on baseball on Thursday with no concert, no reopening, it's not going to be talked about like it was when you have 11,000 people on a reopening and then you have a concert. And if you got to bring in a concert, that's fine. I don't even care whether it's Big and Rich or not. But having it be a reopening promotion, you had to know what was going to happen. You had to. You had to. I can't buy that they're just stupid. It's just they had to know.
Weird day at the ballpark. Between Adam Frazier getting a little like video montage or whatever, and I get they have to, but it's just so strange right now that Adam Frazier is simultaneously their only all-star at the moment and also their best trade chip. Like that's so odd. Like it's just a weird moment in time for the Pirates right now. It's kind of today was sort of a microcosm of it all.
Yeah, and I would love to be a fly on the wall or on the phone of your conversations with your family on your real off-air thoughts about this very bizarre experience and what you were covering tonight and all of that. Yeah, it's an asinine, bizarre situation to say the very least. The Pirates kind of Kramered themselves and stepped into and fell into, if you like that. Yeah, Kramered themselves. They fall, backwards into all the time optics-wise. And on the field, forget optics, they didn't do it tonight. 7-2 lost to the Milwaukee Brewers, this morning, as the game and the show trickled into after midnight. The Pirates now lose. They are now 29-51. I have to give them some more wins than I said. They're 29-51. The Brewers 49-33, still atop the division. Mike, appreciate the time, man. Enjoy your weekend there. So Mike Persak of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Definitely appreciate the time from him. As the Pirates again lose 7-2. Will Crow, regular ho-hum 4 innings. Rich Rodriguez, worst outing of the year. So that's not great. We talked some trade pieces. They got some. They have some players that can bring value. They have some players that are having all-star caliber years. I think Bryan Reynolds is going to get there. I somehow, in my heart of hearts, feel like he's going to squeeze in. I do definitely think he deserves it. Adam Frazier getting there, that's cool for him, but he definitely is probably dealt. And then the optics aren't good, and I definitely would have loved to see Max Kranick this weekend. That would have brought some conversation. That would have brought them a news story. That would have brought them a headline potentially on some local news outlets, to say the least. That would have brought them coverage, conversation, and maybe fans. That might have brought him fans to the ballpark if you had him going out there after what he did in his first outing. 5 perfect. To see what he could do in start number 2, that might have brought fans. So if you care about that, that could have brought fans, if nothing else. That'll do it. Hit that subscribe button. Smash that button. We see a lot of you in the chat, which I appreciate after midnight. Thank you. I didn't figure that was going to occur. That's why I wanted to have a guest. So thanks. Smash that subscribe button. Help us get all of our content to you all throughout the channel, of course. And you'll get notification when anything is uploaded and released, as well as goes live here, like these post-game shows on Pittsburgh Sports Live. So for my guest, Mike Persak of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, as he covers the Pirates there for the PG, for all of us at Pittsburgh Sports Live and throughout the now family of networks, I'm your host, as always, Mike Asti. The Pirates losers on the field and optically